Welcome to New Mexico Restaurants Now, where we get you the inside scoop on the food scene across New Mexico. This episode is brought to you by NMRA's Chef Table sponsors. These businesses provide the most generous level of support to help keep our restaurants protected, informed, and successful. So thank you to Benny Keith Foods, the Food Industry Self-Insurance Fund, Heartland Payment Systems, Shamrock Foods, Cisco New Mexico, and U.S. Foods. We wouldn't be here without you. I'm Carol White of the New Mexico Restaurant Association, and our guest today is Scott Feuille from Taylor Garrett Spirits. He's also representing the New Mexico Distillers Guild. It's great to have you here, Scott.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
So this is fun. It goes out of our usual path because we're usually talking to restaurateurs about their restaurants. But the first question I always ask restaurateurs is, how did you get your start in the business?
Well, it's a little bit different, I think, than most paths that people take to restaurants. I got my start in distilling because I really enjoy the idea of craft artisan production. And I am a huge fan of the craft brewing movement here in New Mexico, but realized that if I was going to be a part of that craft movement, it had to be something other than beer. There's quite a few folks out there have been doing it quite a while. So I may or may not have started distilling things in my garage to learn the art of distilling. And I may or may not have taken that knowledge and parlayed that into an actual business in which we are producing legally distilled whiskeys. And I'm also the distiller for Vara. So we do a line of spirits for them as well.
We'll get into that because I want to understand the difference between the two, but mostly or exclusively, you make whiskey.
Correct. Taylor is exclusively whiskey. And I have a line of 5 different whiskeys, everything from a bourbon mash bill to a single malt. And we are a little bit unique in the marketplace because in the course of possibly or possibly not distilling in my garage, I developed an aging process that rapidly ages whiskeys and allows me to get my whiskeys to market significantly faster than they would otherwise.
So do you have a degree in chemistry or something that makes you able to do this, or just experimenting in the garage works?
Well, I wouldn't say that I do have a degree in mechanical engineering, but I would not say that that is a requirement for those garage experiments. There's a lot of knowledge out there that's available for anybody that wants to look into learning the art of distilling. And, now we're even getting some professional education in the form of CNM doing professional distillation education, which is fantastic for us in the industry. We'll get a new crop of talent coming out that doesn't exactly have to expose themselves in their garages.
Yeah, they can actually do some work in the education system, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great program. And again, I think you're looking to get folks out of that have the knowledge to help you and the other distillers that are out there. How many distillers are in New Mexico?
Well, it's kind of a tough number to track down, but I know that we've got a good 25 active distilleries. And then there are several distilled spirits plant permits that have been issued by the TTB, which is our regulating arm of the government that regulates distilling. And if you count those, we're up to about 32, but I'm not sure at this moment how many of those are actually up and running and active. They're just at various stages of development. So when you compare that to the brewing community, we're certainly smaller, but we've got a lot of momentum and there's a lot of growth in the industry.
Interesting. So your licensing, and I think we talked about this last time I saw you, your licensing comes mostly from the federal government or the state government?
It's both, actually. So in order to get a distilled spirits permit, that has to come from the federal government first. And then once they've approved your business entity as a distilled spirits plant, then that will go on to the state and they come in and look at the facility and give you a craft distiller's permit for the state of New Mexico. You have to have both before you can actually legally go into business.
And then you can sell out of your distillery, is that correct? And then you can also sell craft beers and New Mexico wines out of your distillery, is that correct?
That is correct. And New Mexico, we're very fortunate in the laws here in our state, particularly compared to other states. And I won't get into some of the complications that other states have as distillers. But here in New Mexico, as a distiller, you are allowed to open up your primary place of business, have 3 additional tasting rooms, and you can sell both package and cocktail directly to the consumer. So on-premise and off-premise sales out of any of those locations. And because of the passage of House Bill 255 last year, which went into effect July 1st of 2021, we have a reciprocal agreement that we can sell any New Mexico made craft beer or wines as long as they are made and licensed in the state of New Mexico.
So this is kind of brilliant. And one of the things that House Bill 255 did, so a lot of my members love House Bill 255 because it's going to allow them to sell alcohol without the originating cost of $300,000, which is what our licenses went for before. This will actually allow them to sell New Mexico spirits for an additional $500. And you and I are going to be on a webinar with our members here coming up. And one of the things we're going to talk to them about is that the business model really works for distilled spirits. So beer and wine is nice, but distilled spirits are even better. And I think it's really important that the consumer understands that there's different licenses available in New Mexico. And this is just one of those licenses. So if you're in a restaurant and they don't have a nice margarita, you might talk to them about getting a New Mexico spirits license. And one thing this does is it takes those small restaurants and it enables them to have those margaritas. If they've got a nice Mexican restaurant, you always want to have a beer or a margarita with it. And those folks that want margaritas can now have them, because we have some lovely agave spirits being distilled in New Mexico. We can't call them tequila, although some folks are getting their base from tequila specifically. Right. So I don't even know. Can they call it tequila if it's not distilled there?
No, if they bottle it here, in order to call something tequila, it has to be made from 100% agave in Jalisco or other DOCs that Mexico has designated as tequila regions. If it's shipped out of there and rebottled in any format, then it has to be called an agave spirit. But that does not preclude producers here from getting some of those spirits, tweaking them a little bit, doing their modifications to them, and then bottling them here in the state and selling them as agave spirit. But let's not forget the old fashions when we talk about those restaurant menus, because everybody wants their margarita, but I like old fashioned. So the cool thing about House Bill 255 is, for a relatively small investment for a restaurant, only $500 additional, they can take their existing beer and wine license, as long as they've had that license for 1 year in good standing, and with very little effort, other than pretty much writing a $500 check and filling out a very short application, they can expand that restaurant A license into a restaurant A+ license, which allows them to serve New Mexico made spirits in addition to the beer and wine, but only New Mexico made spirits. So they can serve any beer, any wine brands, but then New Mexico made spirits. And because of that diversity that we talked about, at least 20, 25 producers who are producing everything from vodka and some delicious gins and whiskeys and agave spirits and brandies and almost anything else you can think of, some really cool liqueurs. All of those would be available to those restaurateurs who expand to that restaurant a plus New Mexico made spirits license.
So this is such an opportunity, and again, I think the legislature knew what they were doing in pushing these New Mexico industries, right? And so it's one New Mexico industry supporting another New Mexico industry, supporting another New Mexico industry, and we keep the jobs here. We keep the just the spirit, of the whole thing is so New Mexico, and I love that about it, and I love that we can spend this time really looking at all of these industries together and how we grow ourselves in New Mexico. So I want to go back a little bit and talk about your whiskey. You said you have a way of not making it quickly, still craft, but getting it to market quicker. And
Sure.
I'm very curious about that. I can't believe I haven't tasted it before. I really want to taste it. I love a good whiskey. I love an old fashioned. I love a whiskey sour. That's like my favorite in the world.
We make a good one.
You do?
We do.
So talk about your methodology and how you get it there. It's a gorgeous package. I mean, I'm going to get some for my son-in-law.
Well, get all you want, we'll make more, as they say. Now, so Taylor Garrett, I knew that if I'm a huge whiskey lover myself. I love agave spirit and realized that, trying to make tequila or something similar and getting that to market was going to be difficult. I love rums, and I do make a pretty nice rum under the Barra label, but my whiskeys are really, truly my baby and my passion. And so Taylor Garrett is actually named after my two children. It's their middle names. I've got a 6 and an 8-year-old, and it's named after them. There's Brooke Taylor and Tyson Garrett. And it is a true New Mexico product, grain to bottle. We don't source any of the liquor that goes into the Taylor Garrett brand. We use as local as possible as grains that we use. We do use all of our grains come out of Southern Colorado, which is pretty close. And so we still consider that local. And we mash, we ferment, we do everything on site. Of course, distill it, and then we put it into the aging process, which is an all natural aging process that essentially mimics what happens in a barrel over the course of years in just a matter of days. Typically average of 10 to 14 days of aging using the process. There's all natural aging. There is no additives whatsoever. We age it on new American oak that we mill, we toast, and we char right here on property. And we expose the spirit to that wood at the same rate it would be exposed in a 53-gallon barrel. But what we found is a way to catalyze that whole process and catalyze the oxidation of the spirit and the acidification of the spirit and the esterification of the spirit. I know I'm getting off into the weeds here on some pretty technical terms, but basically we make it taste real good in a real short period of time, if that makes more sense.
Thanks for getting it down to my level.
But no, all of the color comes out of the aging process, and all of the flavors that you're looking for in traditional whiskeys, those nice vanilla and caramel notes, the smoothness, the nice finish with a little bit of oak notes as well, all comes out of this process. And we're really pleased with the results and the performance of the product out in the marketplace, and in some of the judgings is starting to reflect that. So we're very excited about it.
Nice. Fabulous. So talk to me about the other distilling that you're doing, and you're doing it in conjunction with Vara wine. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the first products I ever did in my garage, because it's relatively easy to mash in, is rum. And so I do two really nice rums for Vara. One is an unaged light molasses rum using 100% molasses. There's no sugar added at any stage in production. And then the other is dark molasses rum again, no sugar added, that's aged using the Taylor Garrett process to age that into a very rich sipping rum that is done very well in some of the competitions on both coasts and some of the more prestigious competitions. So proud of that, considering it was the first product I ever made, maybe or maybe not, in my garage.
Now, is that rum under the Vara?
It is.
Under the Vara
those
label.
rums are under the Vara label. We also have a gin that's a really nice Mediterranean style. We call it a high desert gin because it does have some of the traditional New Mexico botanicals. Got a really nice sage element to it, but it is a botanical gin with a lot of nice citrus notes, and of course, juniper is the king in that gin. But it's a very very easy drinking gin made by somebody who really didn't like gin all that much to begin with. So. And
if you ever need anybody to taste any of these, I'm here for you. I'm very sophisticated in my tastes. Just so
I will be happy to. I'll be happy to bring some experimentals by for you and watch the faces that you make. So
perfect.
And we've got a brandy program over at Vara as well. We do an unaged immature brandy called our Paso Uno, which is a nice mixer. It's our only version or closest version to anything you might call a vodka, but it still does have a lot of nice grape and brandy characteristics to it. And then we've got a couple of versions of aged brandies. But what's really exciting is our Solera brandy and our aged brandy that was aged using the Taylor Garrett process, but that has now been in sherry barrels for 3 years and is very close to being ready for release. And they are absolutely phenomenal. So we're excited about that.
Very exciting. Yeah.
I also do 3 vermouths for Vara. So for those looking to start up the cocktail programs, wondering about mixers and things that would go in traditional cocktails, we've got a dry, a sweet, and then a very special aperitif aged version of vermouth. So there's a lot of neat opportunities from a lot of the producers here in the state that are ready to get out there and market and start some really fun cocktail programs for some of these smaller restaurants.
Nice. Well, we'll have to we need, we're going to try to get to as many restaurants as possible, but people who are listening to this, if you're listening to it and you go to a restaurant that doesn't have this wine, liquor program, we've talked about wine for so many years, sorry about that, this kind of liquor program or full spirits program, please talk to your restaurateurs, because honestly, they want to hear it from their customers. Customers tell them that they're interested in, having a cocktail with dinner, and all of a sudden they might get the interest. And if they know customers have the interest, they'll be there for it. So talk to me about what keeps you motivated doing this.
Well, this is my artistic outlet. I mean, it is really about creating something cool and then sending it out there into the world. So much like, artists are painting or sculpting or making jewelry or whatever it is that they do, people are writing books. That's a creative outlet. We're working with raw materials, turning them into something that are completely and utterly subjective. And so it's really neat to get that subjective material into the mouths of our customers. And that's what motivates me. It's that interaction. It's somebody coming up and saying, oh boy, I had some of this Taylor Garrett rye the other day, and man, that is the best rye I've ever tasted. Those are the things that motivate us and keep us going. And I think I can say that for all of the distillers here. It's just, we're a fun business. We put joy in a bottle. And so, it's fun to spread that joy and enjoy it and watch how people react to it. So
that's a wonderful byline, joy in a bottle.
Absolutely.
Did you come up with that yourself?
I've been saying it a long time. I don't know that I've heard it from somebody else, but when life gets hard and it's not as fun working around the distillery, or you run into the little day, the in and outs of the day, and people are getting down, I kind of remind the team, hey, remember guys, we're just putting joy in a bottle here. So it doesn't need to be this hard.
Very cool. I'll tell you, we went to, with my board of directors, we went up to Denver and went to a distillery there, and they actually had volunteers bottling for them. And so keep that in mind because it was so fun. I mean, the volunteers all got a bottle of whiskey for working the entire day.
Right.
I mean, there's a workforce for you.
Well, we'll have to ask Andy about the legality of that.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah. You know what? If we tell him it's being done in Colorado, he'll be like, okay, let's do it.
Sure, let's do it. There we go.
Yeah. So tell folks how they can taste your wine, how they can, not your wine, sorry, your spirits, your whiskey, and even the Vara distilled spirits. Where did we go to do that, number one? And then can they order them online?
Well, unfortunately, right now, ordering spirits online in New Mexico is not legal. So they can certainly hit a lot of the venues. They can always come by Vara and Taylor Garrett. We're over on 315 Alameda, just west of the Balloon Fiesta Park. And our tasting room is open there for folks to come in and try it. But we're also, fortunately, in a lot of local on-premise locations as well as off-premise. Several of the Albertsons in the state, Total Wine. I know I'm going to leave a few out, but several of the retail liquor stores, and then we're also finding our way into a lot of restaurants and bars that are taking Taylor Garrett. So. Building some cocktails around the spirit and having them on the back bar, which is really our best marketing. When you talk about what this small restaurant program can do, ultimately it's the bars and restaurants who are my best ambassador. They basically recommend to somebody my spirits, and that gives that customer the permission slip to like it. Because that bartender or that waiter or that waitress, that server has recommended it to them. They end up liking it, and then it's off to the races. So it's a very important part of our business. And one of the things that I've noticed in New Mexico is people are very in tune and very conditioned to walk into a bar or a restaurant. And if they want a beer, they ask, well, what locals do you have on tap? And so that's almost a standard phrase as the server comes up and asks. And I don't think that there's an awareness around distilled spirits in New Mexico as much as there is that awareness around our beers. Mm-hmm. And so what we're really trying to do in the Distillers Guild is to build that awareness amongst the public that, hey, there's some great local spirits out there. And so if you're in the mood for a spirit instead of a beer, instead of asking for one of the big national brands that everybody's familiar with, maybe you should ask for that local spirit. What do you have that's local? And then try something new and something different and get a taste for yourself of the work that we're doing out there in the world.
Yeah, I know. I go to 66 Acres. And they have mostly New Mexico spirits. I don't even know if they have other spirits, but they do fabulous cocktails.
They do.
They have a rum. I don't even know what rum they use, but they have a daiquiri that's to die for.
It might or might not be Vara. I know that we're there, and so and that's the other cool thing about it is the restaurants are able to come up with these cool programs, and it can be something as simple as having 4 or 5 drinks on the menu that's pretty much all you can order, or they can try to build a bigger bar program where they're doing rum and cokes and trying to come up with call cocktails, but it's anywhere in between. And what the margins on distilled spirits and cocktails is really pretty significant when you think about the cost that goes into the bottle and the cost of materials that are in that drink, compared to some of the other alcohols, whether it's a beer or wine. Your margins in distilled spirits are much better. So even some of the breweries have figured that out with just the straight reciprocity that they can add several $1,000s to their monthly bottom line just by adding a few cocktails and a very limited cocktail program in the brewery.
Yeah.
So that really opens some opportunities, I think, for the restaurateurs as well.
Well, and it opens an opportunity for those of us that are gluten-free. It's very nice to have those added cocktails at the breweries, because I love beer. I used to have a brewery, but I can't drink it anymore. So it's nice to have the cocktails available.
Oh, yes. And I know there's some distillers out there putting gluten-free on the bottle, but guess what? It's all gluten-free. So any distilled spirits, unless somebody went back and poured some flour in it, it's going to be gluten-free.
Exactly. Well, you know what, Scott? Is there anything else you want to say before, like the time has gone by very quickly? Is there anything else you would like to say to encourage people to drink New Mexico spirits?
Well, other than the fact that we're really, the New Mexico distilleries are doing some really nice work. So I would encourage everybody to just kind of take that drink local and buy local attitude towards your spirituous drinks as well. And that will certainly help us and help those folks here in the state who are working to build this industry. So appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat with you and say a little bit about New Mexico Spirits and a little bit about our whiskey at Taylor Garrett. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. And I want to thank our generous sponsors, U.S. Foods, Cisco New Mexico, Shamrock Foods, Heartland Payment Systems, the Food Industry Self-Insurance Fund, and Benny Keith Foods for their annual sponsorship of NMRA and its programs. Visit nmrestaurants.org to learn more about our chef table sponsors. Thanks for tuning in to New Mexico Restaurants Now. You can watch this and other episodes on the New Mexico Restaurants Now YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the audio podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Thanks so much for being here.